Okay, so let's take a look at what we have for the chassis. So before we put this thing on here, first thing we want to do is get this plate on here. Not the right way to do it. Okay. I'm going to get that in place like so. Then we want to take, well, before we do that, let's go ahead and put this roll bar on here. The roll bar shouldn't be threaded, but there's one screw here. There's one on the other side. So we just need a bolt long enough to go through, and then on the other side there's a little nut. And that'll hold the roll bar in place. So now that that's in place, this is held by 3 screws on this side. Okay, we'll tighten those in a second, but we also have one in the middle here. That in the middle goes through, but we're just going to tighten these 2 here on the end. That one in the middle is just to hold this centered. Okay, we'll just keep that in place like that for now. All right. All right, so let's see about getting to these shocks now. Basically, I'm going to take these bottom pieces out because the oil gets filled from the bottom here. All right, so let's talk about the shocks. Basically, the shocks consist of a few parts. You have the cylinder, you have the pin, you have a bushing, you have an O-ring, you have a cap, you have the bottom, you have the top. Okay? So first thing you want to do is tighten up the bottom here. Next thing you want to do is you want to put this pin in with a head facing the bottom, just like that. Then you want to fill it up with oil up to that mark that you see right there. And it's what it basically boils down to. You'll be able to see this. You don't see it on camera, but you'll be able to see the threads in there. You want to fill it up with oil just below the threads. And if you fill it up too much, you can just take a little bit of Kleenex and just dip it in there and just take absorb up some of the oil that's in there. Okay, once you do that, you put the brass bushing in next, and then the O-ring goes in afterwards, and then the cap. You screw the cap on. Okay, once you have that, then you can screw on the top here and just tighten the grub screw. There you go. Okay. Helps if I use the right Allen wrench. Okay, if one is a little off than the other, that means that one has a little bit more oil than the other. So I'll probably just add a little bit more oil to this one just to bring it up in line with the other one. Yeah, maybe not. They're darn close now. Okay. I just displaced some of the oil by pushing this in a little bit hard. Okay. All right, so that takes care of the shock, and I used 20 weight silicone oil just for your knowledge. So that's the shocks. All right, so let's put the rest of this thing together. Clean up these oil that's on here. And we'll be ready to roll. Okay, since this is a restoration, I didn't take apart the front end in order to show you how this all goes together. What I did instead is I put the entire assembly in the ultrasonic cleaner, and that's how it came out so clean. So basically, this is already built, and it's not that difficult. You know, if you look at the manual, putting this together isn't a big deal. So I'm not going to go through taking this whole thing apart. I'm just going to continue the assembly and the restoration with what we have right now. So basically, this goes on the chassis like this. So first thing is, we'll need the shocks mounted. So the part with the grub screw, this being the top, goes on the bottom here. And there's a bushing that's inside of the rubber gasket here. And you have a screw with a washer that goes on the outside, and that's going to get screwed into place. Okay, do the same for the other side. Okay, and then the top part. Okay. There you go. So now that the shocks are in place, we can look at screwing this front assembly in. Now, this front assembly is held together by 4 screws. So let's just start with one of them just to get it in place. Okay, so now we can turn this over, get the rest of the screws in. Okay, once we have that front part in, we need the steering with the servo saver. That's what this guy is here. So get this put in next. Okay, so there's a screw, there's a washer, and then there's the servo saver. Okay, and once that's in, you basically just need to screw these rod ends into here. Now the original screws that we had were kind of pretty messed up. They were all bent up. So I'm gonna source some new screws, and they look like they're 2 millimeters or 2.5 millimeter screws, probably more along the 2 millimeter route. So let me get some 2 millimeter screws here, and we can put the rod ends in place and get this thing all wrapped up on the front side. Okay, got a couple of 2 millimeter screws here, and they have to be 2 millimeters because this part of the knuckle is threaded. So it's threaded for 2 millimeters. Okay, that's one. Get the other one in here. Okay, so what are we going to do next here? Let's attack the chassis. So first things first, let's attach some of these guys back on the chassis. These will hold the body. These are the body posts here. And get a couple of these going. Okay, and then we have these little offsets here. and go one here. Okay, got another one here. And then we got the last one here. Okay, so now that we got the chassis, we got the servo mounts on here. Let's go ahead and mount the servo to the chassis here. And we're not going to use this manual speed controller, but I just think it looks pretty damn cool having a vintage part on the chassis. So, you know, that'll go there, and then basically this will slide right into here, and this will pop into place there. And we are almost done here. So at this point, let me clean up this mess a little bit, and let's just wrap this up, you know, because we're really close, and definitely want to show off the nice wheels that we got for this. We're going to keep the stock ones, but the tires were all messed up, but we'll keep the stock wheels for sure. But we have some nice aluminum ones that we're going to put on there and make this all snazzy like. And we might even get a couple of front spotlights in this as well. So stay tuned, let me clean this up and we'll come back. Okay, I cleaned up this area. So why do I have this apart? Why is the servo back off? Well, because after I looked at it, it dawned on me that I put the servo on where I wanted it, but I put the bolts on the wrong way. So if you look at these servo mounts, they have a notch in them, and the reason for that notch is so when you put the bolt in there, it won't, or the nut in there, I should say, it won't turn, it holds it in place. So I unfortunately did the wrong thing and put the bolt where the nut should go. So I took this thing apart, but I wanted to show you the mistake I made, because these videos are all about you learning from my mistakes and actually hopefully picking something up that might help you along the way, even if it's not a mistake. So anyways, the point of the matter is I put the bolts in backwards, and I'm just fixing the error that I made. And you know what, it sure makes it a lot easier if you put these things in the right way, because then you don't have to worry about holding a nut in place. There we go. I just wanted to make sure that there was clearance back there for the speed controller, the manual speed controller, even though we're not going to be using it. Still want it done right. So now what are we going to do? Well, let's mount the steering servo here onto the front of this chassis here. So this thing is, we'll put that on in a second. The steering servo is going to get mounted here. And we're going to need, I think, a 2.5 millimeter. We keep one of those long ones? No, of course we didn't. So I need to get a 2.5 millimeter, or a 2 millimeter, I should say, bolt for this. So in the meantime, we can go ahead and mount this. We need 2 screws here. Oops. All right, so we got this guy mounted, and so we basically just need to get it a 2mm screw for this to bolt in there. All right then, so let's get this 2mm screw in here. All right. We got that all sorted. We got the front steering servo, and we got the rear, the manual speed controller in the back, and typically we would have the receiver as well, but I don't think we're going to bother with the receiver. We could also go ahead and put in the on-off switch, you know, here as well. But yeah, for the time being, let's just forego that. But we'll definitely put the antenna mount on here. And the antenna mount, let me just screw for that, right? I don't think it's gonna be. Okay, so this will work. All right, so we'll put the antenna mount back here. Typically that's where the antenna mount would go. So this thing's almost done. Need a clip for that. Much better. So there's that. So what's left? The wheels and tires, right? So here's the thing. These are the original wheels and tires. They're okay. I can clean them up. That wouldn't be a problem. But this is going to be more of a shelf queen than anything else. So we can clean these up. Look at that tire. Totally disintegrated with time, sitting on someone's shelf. That's why I prop up all my models on stands. But anyways, there's some discoloration here which could easily be painted. But anyways, we can put those away for now. What we're going to do is we're going to, you know, put these nicer aluminum wheels on here. Hopefully it doesn't, you know, make it look too blingy. But we've got new tires that have been sorted as well. So these are front tires. All right, I don't know. These tires just don't look like they're the right fit for these wheels, unfortunately. I mean, I have troll tires, which we can also try, but I don't know. We'll leave this on for a few days and see what happens. In the meantime, let's see what happens with these with the rear tires. Wow, these look like they're just going to be a pain in the ass as well. I can already tell. All right, I think we did it. Still not convinced about these front wheels though. But all right, wow. Okay, so for the front, bearings. They go one on each side of the wheel. Throw a washer in front, and then a nut. Oops. Okay, same for the other side. A bearing, a bearing. A washer, nut. Okay, now for the rears, there are no bearings on the rears. On the rears, what you're going to need is this adapter here. So for these guys, you're going to have to screw on this adapter. So what's going to happen is this adapter is going to sink into these little grooves on that rear hub. So you got to line up the holes. Okay, well, I guess we don't have to have nuts because these have threads already on the holes. So don't know why they supplied the nuts. Let's try to just get one in first, and the rest should just fall into place. Good thread lock, put some thread lock in the back, but I'm not going to bother with that. Again, if we drive this at all, it'll just be just for a little bit of fun, but we're not going to totally thrash it. So. I think I know why there's extra screws and nuts. I think now I understand. You want the front wheels to look like the rear wheels, so we need to put the nuts, the bolts and nuts in the front. That's why you have the nuts. Okay, we're going to take the front wheels off and do that, but in the meantime, this is the back, this is the rear. For the rear, all right. There we go. Still not going in all the way. All right, there we go. All right, so the other thing we needed to do is put these bolts, these little nuts and bolts on the front. So let's take these out, because we want the front to look like the rear. I'm not convinced that these tires, are the best thing for this, man. Just seems weird. Okay, so the reason for these extra nuts and bolts is for looks. Okay, I could have made myself look smart and filmed this afterwards, recut it just to show you, but you know what? Like I said, we're here to learn from each other's mistakes. So the nuts and bolts were just decorative for the front, to make the front look like the rear pattern with the little nuts, with the little bolts, you know, on them. So that was the whole reason for that. So let's put this back. You see, that's the front with the bolts. And that's the rear with the bolts. See the pattern? So that's what these extras were for, and they're not extras. They were to make the front decorative and look just like the rear. Okay, so The only thing that's left, you see how the back is all drooped out? Well, that's because we need to put in some zip ties for these guys. These guys here to hold it in place, to hold them steady. So let me get that going and then we can wrap this up. Okay, so we have a few zip ties that we have to take into account here for some stuff. First and foremost, the rear, that's slop. So once you have this situated where it's even, where it's level, okay, then you take your zip ties, because what these zip ties here do is they attach to this little piece of metal here, and that's what adjusts your stance. So what we're going to do is take this and pass it through here. I don't know if you can see what I'm doing here, but okay. You need to bend this out just a little bit. There we go. Okay, so if you tighten this, you know, it'll sway the car, the body this way. If you tighten the other one, it'll sway it that way. So I'm going to turn this towards me so I can easily see when it's centered. And then once it's centered and these things are taut, then you will cut the excess off. So just tightening them up. Okay, I'm going to tighten these back. All right. So I want this lowered just a little bit. Okay. So now that I got them where I want, now I can clip them. And that takes care of the rear. And then as far as the front is concerned, we have a couple of zip ties here that hold this top and bottom piece together. So the arms. Okay, I've always assumed this was to give the front arms here reinforcement, but kind of hokey if you ask me, but you know, that's the way it is. So, all right, once I got those nice and tight, I clipped those as well. All right, so that is the finished product there. The body, we cleaned up the body, but that's all it really needed was just cleaning. So still not convinced that these front tires are the best, but anyways. So there you go. Well, there she is, the finished product. This was a fun build. All the parts were there, minimal, going into the salvage, into my salvage inventory. The parts cleaned up nicely. I can't stress, the value of an ultrasonic cleaner. Seriously, they're not that expensive. I mean, you've got metal parts like these vintage cars do. It's just amazing how clean they will get the parts. I can't stress that enough. But this thing is just turned out beautifully. I mean, even the plastics, no cracks, no abrasions. And you can always tell the vintage from the reproductions because the vintage plastics have that orange tint to them, or the yellow tint to them, and and that just adds a heck of a lot of flavor to everything. Even the motor amount. I mean, it's just this thing was just crazy fun and just totally clean. We kept the original wheels. I just decided to add a little bit of bling, but what a pain in the ass it was to put these tires on these wheels, as you saw. The original wheels and tires are easier. They're multi-part wheels, so they're easy to put onto the tires. But this was a total pain in the butt. But that was the only painful part about the whole build. Otherwise, you saw everything was so easy. We kept some of the vintage look and feel, like the manual speed controller. I do have the original bumper, but it's kind of not in such a great shape, so I ordered a new one. Once that arrives, I'll put that on. The only thing I plan to do beyond the look and feel it has now is put the original battery back in. I cleaned it up some, so I might just do that just to give it the vintage, the complete vintage look to it. The body, beautiful body. It just needed a little bit of cleaning up, but outside of that, the decals were in great shape, still are. The body itself had just one area that needed, that was repaired. Unless you looked for it, you wouldn't have known. You won't know. But get this other body post on here. There we go. But the body cleaned up nicely as well. Vintage body. I mean, I'm sure this thing had stories to tell, but again, the body turned out amazing. It even had the original netting, which is usually missing from the bodies, which is, like, again, very cool to see, the originality with it. So anyways, this is truly a success in my book. Definitely going on the shelf. I'm going to be really happy and proud to display this little guy. And yeah, there you have it. I hope you learned from the mistakes I made along the way on this video. That's why I make the videos. I don't edit them to hide anything. I'm happy to make the mistakes and happy to clean them up after I see the mistake I've made. But nothing much to these builds. The problem is that these things are so expensive now. The reproductions are there, and I'm sure they use better quality parts, and I'm sure they have better performance. But obviously, there's nothing like restoring the originals. And, you know, there's a lot of history to them. This is a 1983 car, and it's amazing what they did in 1983 and how they built things. So anyways, again, hope you enjoyed the video, and whatever you do in life, you know, whether it's restoring, bringing things back from the dead, or, you know, designing new things, enjoy and share. I'd love to look at other people's stuff. If you have any comments, questions, you know, feel free to post. But whatever you do, enjoy life, because you know what? Like I always say, you only live once.